What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to CanesCast. I'm one half of your host here, Phil, here with Garrett. We're excited to get rolling. Third game episode, I should say, not including our season predictions and look aheads and everything, but our third episode going into our next game. We got Ball State coming up, a big win, an expected win against FAMU. We dominated, did a lot of the things that we thought we would. Garrett and I both have a few things that we're probably going to bring up that we would have liked to see, have done better. And I think no one said it better than Cristobal just with his actions at halftime. But we're excited, 2-0 start. And, we're off to as good of a start as we could imagine because, hey, with that comes a top 10 ranking. So, Garrett, why don't you get us rolling with your thoughts on, the season right now, but, what we saw against FAMU.
Well, the most important thing was that Cam Ward was able to kind of keep pace with his Heisman candidacy. 300 and some yards and three touchdowns, one rushing on the ground as well. Mm-hmm. What I had hoped was that we would have maybe hit that by about halftime, so we could have had a whole half of the 2s and 3s to kind of come up and finish the game out. He actually did have that third touchdown made, if you will. It just didn't count to Isaiah Horton, which was one of those incredible throws. He's, kind of rolling against it, it seemed, and he was getting hit. And, just found him, Isaiah Horton, cutting across the back of the end zone. Probably the prettiest play of the entire game. It just unfortunately didn't count because we had a holding call on that one. But it was nice to see the guys come out really early. They came out early and really established what we wanted to see. I mean, there was a turnover, as we see my man the Saint right here, getting the turnover, and then they got the ball back and in 2 plays scored a touchdown with the touchdown throw to Elijah Arroyo, though. So that was probably the exciting thing, is that Cam Ward's definitely kept pace with putting up enough numbers to keep his candidacy in serious contention. I would have liked maybe to see more of the 3s. I thought this is a game where we should have probably had the starters all zipped up and out of the game within the first half. What we talked about during the game was it just looked a little lethargic. Didn't look like they had the same energy to end the half as they did to start the half. So Cristobal did, at that point, go ahead and pull the starters back out, start the second half, play, pretty deep in the second half. But, it was a clean game. We can see that we didn't get through Florida totally unscathed. There was a tremendous victory. There were some injuries, some guys that weren't really ready to go or able to go in this game. Had it been a higher end opponent, you might have seen them play in some cases. But Ruben Bain, Jalen Rivers, Ryan Rodriguez all sitting out the game. Damari Brown all sitting out the game. That just goes when you have a tough game. So it was good to get some guys like we were hoping, the experience, and they made plays as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think that was part of the problem. We mentioned the lethargic style, as you highlighted. We talked about that a lot during the game, and that's really all it is to me. There's also a mix of backups and future guys with some starters in the beginning, and I think that didn't necessarily play to the level of urgency and preciseness that Cristobal would have wanted. And that's, like I mentioned earlier, I think that was, evident. He wasn't happy at half, and they came out of half and definitely, went after it and had a new, renewed sense of energy and aggressiveness coming into that. But, a couple of things for me is the snap counts. The snap counts weren't super high for a lot of big players, which I really want to point out. Snap count for Tyler Barron, 27 snaps, but he had 3 sacks. I mean, the guy's dominant. We talk about a guy who's raising his stock. You mentioned Jalen Phillips. I've seen that brought up. It looks the part. Now, granted, he's going to be one and done. Phillips was with us for 2 years, but really only had the 1 year of true impact play for us. But obviously, he relayed that into a tremendous draft position, and he's been a tremendous player for my Miami Dolphins, big Dolphins fan, and is a integral part of the team. And I think Barron has a lot of those traits. I think he's tremendous, and it just gets me excited for when Bain does come back, because I mean, heck, this is all happening without Bain. He ran roughshod against the Gators. We had Bain for 1 series. Obviously, FAMU's not a great litmus test as far as the level of talent that he'll be going against, but he dominated the game. He did what we want, right? We used this game as a barometer for, a Heisman case for Ward, right? To inflate those stats, to pad those stats. Like all these guys have those games where you have those, when you look at the total body of stats, how many came against quote unquote cupcakes, but that's what matters at the end for a Heisman case. And obviously we're hoping, and the odds would suggest that he's got a very good shot at winning the Heisman. So hopefully he continues that. But a performance like this does the same thing for a guy like Barron. The snap count, though, on the other side, it bothers me a little bit that we had to get as many snaps as we did against, Florida A&M with Cam Ward. He played 49 snaps. Not the worst thing in the world because he did come out unscathed. Thankfully, his little Superman dive to score his rushing touchdown, which again will help at the end of the season. Nothing came of that. There were two plays that I would have liked to see, different in that game. And it was the pass to Restrepo. It was just too much in the corner of the end zone there, or to the pylon, I should say, not the back corner, but the front corner. And it just missed him, a pass that he should make. And he didn't make it. And then the deep shot to Sam Brown, where Sam Brown was just, he could have caught it. He could have caught the ball, and he didn't put enough air on it. And I think that that's a pass that Ward would like to have back. Those are the big things I would really point out as far as missed opportunities. That, and just really, I don't want to be mean, but maybe playing with your food a little bit. That's really what I would say.
And let's just say you could look at the game one of two ways. It's a cupcake. It was, just get the backups time. Florida A&M's been pretty successful as far as the FCS level in the last couple of years. They were 2-0 going in the game, given the competition. But with the day and age of we are in, it's good players can trickle down into programs like an Florida FAMU. Excuse me. So I think it's not necessarily the talent gap is being these teams are catching up to a team like Miami. But it is possible to get good players to go down to this level. We live up here in Montana. We're familiar with the FCS level because our two big schools in our state are in that level.
And they've dominated that level.
And they've had some success. Montana went up and beat Nevada.
Outside of North Dakota teams, inside the Dakota teams, Montana's right there with them as far as success recently. Both have played in the championship recently, won the Big Skies, a lot of wins. Exactly, yeah.
Well, and Montana going out there and beat Washington just a couple years ago. So, I mean, that team goes and plays for a national championship last year, 3 years after they lose to an FCS level school. So we saw in college football this last week, you cannot play opponents like a FAMU, or in this case, coming up Ball State, lightly. You will get beat.
On that,
Northern Illinois just came in and beat Notre Dame in their house, so
look at Idaho.
The fact that Miami didn't play down to that level necessarily, but again, I want to say, look at it on the positive side, is that this is probably a pretty good FCS level team. Guys got some talent here. We looked comfortable the entirety of the game outside of the energy, but let's probably say FAMU is a player in the FCS level and plays good football for the rest of the year. So even though it wasn't an equal talent challenge, it was a good challenge on the field nonetheless.
Well, think about it like that too. I was mentioning Idaho. Look at what Idaho did with Oregon. That's part of the reason Oregon has fallen down the polls a little bit. That game against Idaho was a 3-point game in week 1 with 5 minutes left. We're talking about a team that was number 3 in the country. Tons of talent on that roster. We know that. Oregon's one of the most talented teams in the country. They usually are. Their NIL's obviously gigantic too. And you have Idaho come in, FCS level, who, we're familiar with, living out here. Obviously, I'm from South Florida, but half my life I've been in Montana. That's how Garrett and I have met. And Idaho is a player that we've watched Montana and Montana State play pretty frequently. Or they play them every year, basically. And I might have that not exactly right, but they play quite often. And for them to go to Oregon and push Oregon, I don't care. There's no reason with a talent gap that drastic. One of the most talented, a top 5 team, a team that's been, everybody knows Oregon in the country, right? It's to have that be that close of a game. There's something there. That team is better than you think. And then they turned around and they beat Wyoming. While not a powerhouse by any stretch of the imagination, their biggest claim to fame is that Josh Allen played there, and then Larry Nance played there, and college basketball, and they had a little March Madness experience with him. Those are their two biggest claims to fame, but still FBS level, and they beat them. So it's these schools are getting better. The talent gaps across the board are weakening, or I guess closing. I don't want to say weakening, they're closing. And yeah, these teams aren't just necessarily pushovers all the time. You're right, FAMU. I think they have won 21 of their last 22 or 22 of their last 23. So they're a good opponent for that level. They've done a lot. But yeah, I think it just comes to not overlooking anybody. And that halftime message was sent, but we wanted to see a full half. In our perfect world, we're nitpicking over a game that we won by 47 points or whatever it was, 48 points. We can't do that. You know, we can do that because we feel like this team is so talented, but we're truly nitpicking when it comes to that. Our biggest fear is that the Canes are going to look ahead and take opponents lightly. I think that we're starting to see that change. I don't think they're doing that. 36.5-point favorites before we play a team that back-to-back years just pushed Alabama, right? So I hope now we're not looking ahead to USF where we were worried we'd be looking ahead to Virginia Tech. So every game is the next biggest game. Let's keep winning.
Ball State looked to me like, you know, they were struggling with the team they played last week, Missouri State. So I expect this to be a very similar game to what we just witnessed. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say FAMU would go out and beat Ball State. I think it's a possibility. I don't think it's you know, a bad call necessarily, or too outlandish to say something of that nature. Yeah. You know, I think again, the right time and place, you know, a lower level team could go up and cut you if you're not prepared. So I would like to say the positive part of the whole game was Cristobal getting on his guys a little bit, you know, maybe chewing them out if that was how it was done. And they definitely looked a little bit more peppy coming out of the halftime. So that's what I want to see going into Ball State. I want to see us take that opponent seriously. I want us to play well, get younger guys like the Chris Johnsons, you know, Markel Bell probably starts another game, you know, get Samson Okunlula in there on the other end, you know, to back up Maui Noah. And let's get a little of the rest to go into another 4 or 5 tough games ahead of us, you know. Yep. Ease into that section of the schedule just a little bit, because while these games are important, again, I think Cam Moore needs to keep up 300-ish yards, 3 touchdown, 4 touchdown type of performances to continue with the momentum that he has. You know, because it's not just us. There's lots of people getting on the hype train for Cam Ward and the Miami hype train as well. What I don't want to see is Miami to buy into that hype and fall into a trap. Certainly not against a Ball State, but even coming up to the week after that against USF, like you just touched on.
We just want to be crisp. We just want to be crisp. We're going into ACC play here before we know it. And we just desperately do not want, and I don't think this team is going to be prone to that. I'm going to give this team the benefit of the doubt that if there is a slip up, they have the culture, the mindset, and the perseverance now that's built into that locker room and that roster that they will respond, and it won't derail the season if you had a game like Georgia Tech. Now, obviously, Georgia Tech was the worst case scenario because it's not a game that we actually lost or had to lose. That's why that's so frustrating. But do we have a team here that can respond to a loss if it happens? I think we do, but looking at it,
and Georgia Tech just got wiped up by Syracuse, who we have to go play at the very last game of the season. So
we talked
early
about
on in the season
on Saturday,
all the people's predictions of who's tough and what, it changes so much. Now Miami's going in the right direction. We're, you know, moving up, I guess, if we do the magic that way. We're up into the top 10 from 19 in 2 weeks. We've played one quality appointment and one that's really not great, but I think it's the country seeing what we're seeing on the field as well, is that there's talent on this team. As long as they are coached effectively and we don't do this nonsense that we've fallen into, and we've touched on it a million times. As long as we don't do that, we should be in good shape. You know, the plays being made by the linebackers, making those interceptions, that kind of stuff, that was really you know, awesome to see. But Saint getting that touchdown, because that interception, that was a heck of an interception. He made a heck of a play on that. Yep. You get a guy like Adarius Hayes, you know, a young guy that's literally, this is his first year coming out, and him making a play. You know, those things are exciting. Getting the guys that aren't probably going to get a ton of burn in the ACC slate, getting them on the field, getting Icar, getting JoJo traded their first catches. These are the things that we want to continue to see going into Ball State. I imagine Miami wins that game handily. 56 points isn't unheard of. You like to hope to see the defense stays tough, because I think they've played like one of the top 10 defenses probably in the country. Statistically, I think that's going to be backed up. One's not a great barometer, but over games 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, when the averages come out, it doesn't matter who the opponents are. Keep the stats that you want to see that are positive in check. Things like yardage totals, passing totals, that kind of stuff. So I would like to see Ball State, the game that we're coming up to, those types of positivity, positive directions, continuing to go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the goal. I just wanted to touch real quick, our top 5 graded players, because I'm a big pro football focus guy, as far as appreciating the grades and stuff that they put out. The grades are basically for the fans, so people get an idea of kind of how well a player played, but there is a lot of benefit to it. And I think that, teams use it. There's grading and teams use it to varying degrees, but it does play a difference in, actually breaking these things down and really looking at this. So, us trying to do the research, I think that there's a lot to that. So I appreciate seeing, having grades to kind of go back on and show. Tyler Barron, I mentioned 92.4 grade, our top graded guy, Cam Ward at number 2, 90.8 grade overall. Zaquan Patterson was our 3rd highest ranked or graded player, 82.7.
Really encouraging, a young player, a guy that I think we're going to see a lot of good things from. That's awesome that he's up in that category. His second game in. That's awesome.
100%. Not just his interception though, but his overall play. The guy behind you, the Saint, crushed it. 81.5, our 4th highest rated player. And then, drum roll, I'll give you one guess. You're not going to get it. I don't even know if you want to guess. I'll just say it.
Chris Johnson.
Nope. Raul Aguirre, 81.3 grade overall on 18 snaps, excuse me. So a limited sample size, but he did really well in the snaps that he played, which was great to see. And yeah, I agree with what you say about, basically continuing to stack the stats against a Ball State. We should win by a lot of points. I'd like to see us come out and be aggressive. I want to say, and have these guys out by halftime. In a perfect world, we will. I'm
gonna go real quickly and throw in my concern, because I did see something that concerned me outside of effort. Outside of that is, I did think Reese Poffenbarger, when he came in, puts a little fear in me personally. I think if it comes down to it, the true backup is Emory Williams. I do believe their intent is to keep him on the shelf for a red shirt this year, so that sets him up for his long-term career success, potentially to have 3 more years to play. But I liked Reese's ability to move out of the pocket. But I do stress thinking if we have to rely on him exclusively for a production against good teams, that's a little scary. So I would put an even more importance on Cam Ward's health, that if he goes down, I honestly think our season goes down along with it. Unfortunately, I don't want that to be the case, because Emory could come in and be my hero, but that's the part that concerns me is, the defensive line could sustain a Ruben Baines injury. Jalen Rivers taking the week off. We had some struggles there, but it was overall, it was tolerable. And I think, again, important that those guys get on the field. But Hoffenberger's reign scared me a little bit. The dropping the pass in a good weather environment is probably the biggest concern. And I did see somebody say this, and I noticed that too, is he looks a little small. So I'm not saying you can't be successful at that level, but that part kind of concerns me a little bit. That would he be able to stand up to the hits? Is he gonna be strong enough to be the guy should heaven forbid Cam Moore not be available at any point in the season?
I think that he can come in for a game or so. I think that we also saw a very limited, play selection for him at that point of the game. There were some passes that he was throwing, but he was running. I think it was important that maybe some of those little runs where the RPO stuff was on film, because then you create that potential confusion if it comes down to having to see him play in a game. And I think, yeah, a game or so, can we sustain that for a half potentially with our defense and just the lack of film and then what there is on film, just, you don't know what you're going to get from him. So the element of surprise, I think, if you have to sustain multiple, who knows? I mean, maybe he surprises us. I don't want to knock him. If push comes to shove, do you put Emery in for a game or 2 or 3? You can, you have that. Hopefully that's all it would take, or it was around a bye week, so it wouldn't have to be that much if Ward had to miss the games. On that token, though, it's funny because in a game like this, kind of feels like we've said it's stat padding. I believe that this is a game where I'd like to see Ward maybe take off a few more times smartly, not lowering his shoulder, not getting himself in harm's way, but, you know, adding to those rushing totals that will be at the end of the season, taken into account when it comes to a Heisman, you know, potential Heisman candidacy and, you know, top quarterback in the country type thing. So
Yeah, he's not getting it with 1,000 yards like Jaden Daniels did last year. He's more, you know, he's got to put up the numbers that Joe Burrow did in his Heisman season. You know what I mean? It's got to be a lot of throwing touchdowns. He's capable of that run. I just don't see him popping off 100 or 200-yard games really at any point in the season outside of a, you know, a crazy outlier game that gets real tough. So I really think he's got to stick three or four passing touchdowns almost every week to stay on top of it, because there's around the country there's teams every now and again throw 5,000 yards and put up some gaudy stats. The important thing Cam Ward will have on his advantage is ideally, without sticking my foot in my mouth, being on a good team that has success over the course of the season as well. That should help him take a leg up over similar stats if it boils down to it at the end of the year. So that's,
and
you know, again, Ball State's gotta be a game where he's on point. You know, like you touched on, maybe those 2-3 passes that he missed last game, make sure those are connections that he's making this third game this season.
Well, and these are games too where, you know, well, we keep talking about the stat pad and we keep saying that phrase. There's gonna be a game, you would imagine there could be a game that's tough. We're not just going to roll over everyone. Maybe he only throws a touchdown. Maybe he has a couple interceptions in a game and he has 1 touchdown and 1 rushing touchdown. Well, these are the games where you inflate those and it keeps his average better and you prevent against those things. But I do think it's not going to hurt him to have 5, 6, you know, rushing touchdowns at the end of the season. He has a couple 100 yards, 400 or 500 yards rushing. No, he's not going to have 1,000 yards rushing. That's not what he's trying to do. He's emphasizing the fact that he is a great passer and he can connect and you know, he's an NFL player that's still playing college football. He came back to raise his stock and he's there, and he's with the talent in Miami and the coaching in Miami, he's taking his game to another level, and that's going to be shown. And that's going to do a lot recruiting for us. That's going to do a lot in the transfer portal for us. And I'm excited. I'm excited for that. I know you're excited for that, but it's one game at a time. We can look ahead as fans, but we hope the team doesn't look ahead as fans.
I'm going to put a early season subplot out there. Can Xavier Restrepo win the Blitnikoff Award? You know, I think he's every bit as capable of continuing to do what he's done in the first 2 games. And if he keeps that up, I could totally see that being another accolade that Miami could possibly add into the trophy case this year, because he's played extremely well. He's on point. I think he's as ready as anybody on this entire season. So that's something I continue to look forward to, is Xavier Restrepo getting continue to keep his stats on the extremely productive side.
Oh, 100%. And we talk about Bain and Barron and Ward and Martinez having his first touchdown. That was great. He made the top 10 as far as graded players too for us. He had a good game. But yeah, Restrepo
Barron maybe with the Lombardi or you know, Nagurski.
Yeah.
He's got that potential. And again, if he keeps throwing 2-3 sacks down in a couple of games here, he could easily be the guy in the line for an accolade like that as well.
I think it's going to be tough. Realistically, do I think that not for Barron necessarily? Do I think that Restrepo is great? Is Restrepo going to be one? Is Restrepo one of the best receivers in college football? Without a doubt. Is Restrepo a guy that's going to be playing on Sundays? Without a doubt. Is he one of the greatest receivers in Hurricanes history? Yeah, the stats show that. He's going to have the most 100-yard games in the history of the Canes.
Because he tied it. He tied it this last game with Andre Johnson.
That's what I mean.
At 8.
He's going to break it. He's going to break it at some point. You would think, barring some injury or something like that, he might break it this week. The point is, he makes his living on that. He's the best route runner in the country. He's got arguably the best hands in the country. He's one of the quickest players in the country. He's not blazing fast. He makes every catch. It's going to be hard to knock off the McMillan kid from Arizona when you have a starting game like he did of 300 yards
I
receiving.
agree. But at the end
tough.
of the season, 1,300 yards, 10, 12, 13, 14 touchdowns on a good team.
Does he do that though?
I think it's in the conversation. What I say is probably the favorite. That's hard to say. I think he's going to be one of the finalists. Very much so, though. I think that's very possible.
No, I 100% agree. I agree that he'll be a finalist. I just think that the gaudy jump off the page, this guy's going to be a top 5 pick receiver type stuff. Because let's face it, Restrepo will be Restrepo to me will be a day 2 pick at best. And that's just because of how he's going to test at the combine. That sucks because he's going to make a team and he's going to make a roster and he's going to make the team better because he's reliable. He's going to be everybody's favorite target. He understands the route tree and route running like a quarterback does. He knows where to be in zone when the defense plays zone. He knows how to get open in man, all that stuff. But the jump off the page measurables that gets guys drafted, it's, that's a different thing. And that's what, it's sexy, I should say. And that's what's going to draw voters, I believe. So am I going to be pulling for him? Yes. Does he deserve it? Absolutely. But we'll see. The season has to play out. And ultimately, the cool thing about this team is that it feels very team first. So award second, team first, whatever helps. As long as this team's winning, that's what they're after, and let the chips fall with it where they may. With that, guys, we're going to get back to you next week. We're going to be back after what's hopefully a 3-0 start, maybe a top 9, 8, depending on what happens in the rest of the rankings. New ranking for our Hurricanes. We're excited for it. I keep saying excited. We're pumped. We're just happy the season's going the way it's going and the team looks the way it does. As always, guys, with CanesCast, I'm Phil here with Garrett. It's all about the U.
All about the U. See you next week, guys.